record refugee arrivals, with nearly 60% of our annual August and September. 2, a plummeting job market. 3, a suddenly inadequate safety net for recently arrived refugees, and limited capacity within mainstream institutions to provide the level of support demanded by the new economic reality. 4, ORR funding was also lagging behind demand for services for a number of reasons, not the least of which was the rapid growth of the arrival caseload. And 5, to top it off, there is mounting anxiety in the community at large about the continued viability of receiving new refugees. Many responsible and otherwise supportive community members started to ask how they were supposed to deal with the multiple needs of so many families. Many of you will remember and relate to this scenario. About the role of city government in response to the crisis, but I'd like to mention just a few points here. Early on, even before the recession took hold, we identified the need to expand community partnerships and to become a more effective resource to the multitude of organizations that touch refugees in so many ways. So in recognition of this need, we established a quarterly community-wide forum for all comers who are interested in working more effectively or more collaboratively on refugee issues, or simply were looking for help in improving their ability to work with refugees. About a year later, we were all sides by the storm. Mayor Dave Beater was hearing from the schools, the police department, and community members at large about the impact they were feeling and seeing. The mayor decided to take the lead in seeking solutions. I'd like to also point out that the stakeholders that were convened were more than just the usual suspects here. The mayor has the ability to call a meeting and people will come. And this is the beginning of the work that became a community-owned strategic plan to make an impact for refugee resettlement in our city. As I've already once, an agreement was made early on in the process that the effort should focus on growing resources rather than trying to put a cap on resettlement. If we garner resources, coordinate, consolidate, expand where possible, and make more accessible, then it would be possible to bring community capacity up to the resource need. This is what I refer to as reframing the dialogue. Here, even though we chose not to focus on limiting the number of refugee arrivals, the largest resettlement agencies in Boise did voluntarily request a temporary reduction for 1 year. Right thing to do for refugees and for a struggling community. This is a long way toward building goodwill. I emphasize here that the plan is not the same as the effort or the change. The plan is the blueprint for community action. Community action promoting positive change is the purpose of the plan. I'd like to give you a sense of what is included in the plan itself. There's a link to the entire plan and accompanying documents on the IOR website, the link to which you will see at the end of this presentation. The purpose of the plan is to strengthen the supports for successful refugee resettlement in the greater Boise area. The plan has 6 sections addressing education, employment, healthcare, housing, transportation, and social integration. It has an overarching goal, specific objectives, and action steps to achieve those objectives. These parties are identified as our potential and actual partners that should be involved in accomplishing the objective. And finally, quarterly progress reports keep everyone, including the community at large, informed and accountable about accomplishments and achievements related to the plan and to the expansion of resources in the community. A lot of thought to the idea of replicability of the process we've developed in Boise, and here are some thoughts in the 4 fundamental principles. Fundamental in the sense that they should apply anywhere and will well from place to place. Types, community volunteers, educators, and certainly refugees themselves all want to succeed in their endeavors. Attribute that's if you provide some effective tools for working with refugees, organizations and individuals are very likely to come on board. It's when they're frustrated, when the standard tools don't work with refugees, when seemingly insurmountable language, cultural, and educational barriers blocking the way. This is when you start to see support for refugee resettlement fade away. Or this principle, when people, whoever they are, feel valued, appreciated, well served, they are much likely to feel that they belong to a community. Information is crucial. We have for better understanding of refugees and refugee resettlement that seems nearly endless. There are many misperceptions that can only be corrected with a continuous flow of information. Believe of transparency. Consider it your job to be sure that everyone in the community has the information needed to be an effective partner. Tempting it may seem sometimes, I would caution against the impulse to fly below the radar. I told you to have a friend, you have to be a friend. Well, the same rule applies to having partners. If you're willing to serve on boards, get involved in community planning efforts, and find other ways to support community initiatives, likely to experience a high degree of reciprocity. This principle is not unrelated to the principle of helping others succeed by providing the tools that they need. Susan said in her introduction, every community is unique, so cloning or transplanting a process in its entirety from one place to another isn't likely to be a recipe for success. It's therefore crucial to assess the community climate, map resources, build your own particular partnerships, and tailor your approach to fit unique circumstances. Rep will work, modify what doesn't quite fit, reject what isn't right for your community, and create something new. Community means that the impetus for and momentum toward positive change comes not from the resettlement program, not from city government, not from any single source, but rather change begins to grow organically throughout a community. Community only becomes a significant outcome, but more importantly, it's the key to sustainability. My part of the program today by recapping the key learning that came out of our planning process and now nearly 3 years of plan implementation. Education and information for community partners and the general public is essential, especially if you want the community at large to embrace the role of the receiving community. Dialogue to focus on possibilities rather than on limitations is empowering and can unleash tremendous creativity. One partnership is a two-way street. It's a cliche to say you reap what you sow, but it's true. I don't achieve success in a community planning initiative if you limit your attention to the folks already at the table. The best way to reach out to the uninitiated and the uninvolved is to let your community partners make the case for refugee resettlement and for getting involved. To be honest, resettlement professionals can easily come across self-serving when promoting their own cause. Your collaboration through education and dialogue can put your partners in a great position to be your best advocates. Push resettlement out to the larger community, but of course, this will only work if there's buy-in. Promote the program as a resource to the community and articulate the benefits of the whole community approach can help you get the buy-in. And finally, I have to say that it was a very important aha moment for us when we began to see quite clearly that growing resources for refugees was going to benefit either directly or indirectly other underserved populations as well. We're talking seniors, people with disabilities, those who rely on public transportation, those who are challenged in accessing health care, or who would otherwise benefit from an expanded community resource base. So by extension, there's a strong case to be made that this kind of initiative can strengthen the entire community. So with that, I am going to turn the mic over to Teresa McLeod to talk about engaging community leaders.
Great. Thanks so much, Jan. Thank you also on behalf of the city to our terrific partner, Jan Reeves with the Idaho Office for Refugees, and welcoming America for bringing this opportunity to the city. It's exciting to work hard on an initiative and then be able to share the story and hopefully share the successes outside of your community. With that, I'd like to address engaging community leaders, and I'm going to look at the mayor's strategic vision as well as the engagement of city and community partners. And I think Jen probably summed it up best in his last bullet point, which is the benefits that we are realizing for our refugee resettlement plan and the 6 different pillars really does impact so many other aspects of our community. So it makes for a very natural buy-in for city government to be involved. Because in city government, we have to be very mindful that we're utilizing tax dollar resources to benefit the entire community. And if we ever focus on an initiative that has a pretty narrow audience, we could be criticized for that. But what we've learned is, just as Jan stated, that our efforts truly are coming up with some solutions that are now enjoyed by senior citizens and children and youth and other at-risk populations. As I get started, I had to show you this slide, which is a great demonstration of why the city is involved. Looking at people in these pictures as tomorrow's leaders, and thrilled to have them in our community. So for the city of Boise, we became a natural partner in part because of Mayor Dave Beater's strategic planning that he guided the city through several years ago. As Jan mentioned, he came into office in 2004, and he had the vision of making Boise the most livable city in the country. So through a very comprehensive process of citizen surveys, focus groups, meeting with employees, meeting with elected and other civic leaders, we were able to come up with 5 vision areas for our citizens. 3 of them I'm highlighting today because it's through these 3 that I use a filter on how we are engaged in refugee resettlement. The 3 listed are ensure a safe, healthy, livable community, promote a strong and diverse local economy, and foster an environment where learning, the arts, culture, and recreation thrive. So utilizing these 3 focus areas as the platform for our engagement is a natural opportunity to demonstrate buy-in and to show the city and our city council members and any citizens that might be asking questions why we are involved with supporting refugee resettlement process in our community. And as well, the focus areas were a matrix that the mayor wanted all of our city departments to use in evaluating how we're delivering services to residents. So again, we look at our newest arrivals as well as residents that may have been born and raised here. I want to talk a bit about the involvement of city partners and the point that I'm hoping to make to communities that might be on the line is that there are natural opportunities for cities to become partners. And again, it's two different ways. It's external and it's internal. So externally, we had the Idaho Office for Refugees under Jan's leadership reaching out to the city over a number of years. And in addition to providing their community coordination meetings and inviting the city and the mayor to the annual conferences, also contacting the mayor's office whenever there was a dignitary or somebody that had a level of engagement in the national front of refugee resettlement, always contacted the mayor's office to extend an invitation to meet. So we had this really nice partnership developing while the city was also convening its internal team to look how we were delivering services to our newest arrivals. And the resettlement agencies had reached out to our office over the course of years. They would come in and invite the mayor to fundraising events or to proclamation opportunities. And so we did have a sense of who our refugee resettlement agencies were, and we had a sense of who we could go to through the Idaho Office for Refugees when we needed information. So as the city began to review how we were doing from delivering our services, we knew to convene our resettlement agencies. City departments that have a natural relationship already with refugees in any community are listed on this slide, but I'll elaborate a little more. We have language resources and classes that we offer through our libraries. We have youth programs through our Parks and Rec department. We have celebrations of diversity and culture through our Arts and History department. We work on affordable housing programs through our Housing and Community Development division. And then, of course, the public safety components provided by police and fire. So in your own communities, you have all of these departments within your city organization, but imagine that you have several of them. And again, I would look at the city's outreach to all their residents, because as tax-based organizations, we have a duty to serve all residents, even our newest arrivals. I just encourage you to look at what sort of department engagement there is and start a conversation with those different departments and have them learn more about refugee resettlement if they aren't already engaged. The community partners that the city has worked with over time on a variety of initiatives, as we were looking at our city service delivery, community partners were starting to express some concerns about their ability to provide services to refugees. And that came about, as Jan mentioned, in that perfect storm. The economic recession hit hardest our refugees because the jobs that used to be plentiful in Boise suddenly dried up, and resources were drying up because our refugee resettlement in Boise prior to the recession really had been quite a seamless process and very successful. Refugees would arrive, and through the skills of their resettlement agencies, they were able to land pretty quickly with employment, with affordable housing, and with some transportation options. Suddenly, when we removed those employment options, we then brought into jeopardy the ability for housing, and as soon as you take housing away, that safety net really starts to unravel. So while many of our community partners were very willing to increase their capacity for services, they just weren't familiar with the whole resettlement process. And they were interested in learning more, so again, they could be more responsive. And as they were expressing these concerns to the mayor realized it was his responsibility to convene a larger conversation. And as Jan pointed out, that conversation also serves many of our other community populations. So with Mayor Burr stepping up, he challenged all of us to come together and work on a plan. And again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of that wonderful relationship that the city already had with the Idaho Office for Refugees at their initiation, and then the supporting roles of the refugee resettlement agencies and their collaborations and also their cultivation of relationships with the city departments prior to the crisis. The crisis brought us together with urgency, but I just want to make sure I emphasize that there was really terrific relationship building going on prior to that. So with regard to leadership, the strong leadership was really needed to keep our partners engaged over the long term. And I mentioned professional facilitation because that also can't be underestimated. While Jan and I had the will and the support of our organizations, we also have other responsibilities. So having a professional facilitator who is waking up every day thinking about driving that plan into implementation and delivering it at the community level has really been critical to the success of the community plan in Boise. Our internal departments, because of the leadership of Mayor Beater, who was challenging all of us to look at delivering services at the neighborhood level, they knew that they had to start looking at refugees as customers and determine what kind of barriers were preventing our services from getting to our newest arrivals. And the external partners, what is their engagement and their capacity building? Some natural partners like the United Way, Literacy Lab, our school district, potentially hospitals, a transit company or transit authority. But some folks didn't really see their role at the table. And I think that goes back to Jan's point as well, is that you have to look beyond your usual suspects and help others understand what their role is. Some of the challenges that we had were definitely how do you maintain momentum as other priorities emerge? And I'll speak to that really specifically to the mayor's office. uh, as Jan pointed out, we had the perfect storm that really brought us all in urgency to create this plan. And for a city government and for a mayor, it could be that there's another emerging issue that comes in front of us next year. So how do we maintain our momentum? What's exciting about having a community plan that was created with mayoral leadership and the Idaho Office for Refugees and supported by, I think, close to 80 or 100 organizations now, we have been able as a city to incorporate the needs of immigrants and refugees into our daily dialogue of service delivery and our other conversations with the community. So it's now truly a natural part of our conversations, whether we're talking with the Women's and Children's Alliance or we're talking with the YMCA on providing swimming lessons to third graders and to our refugee students, or we're talking to a nonprofit created to cultivate the artistic talent of refugees into a business enterprise, such as Artisans for Hope. So it's really great that you can expand that conversation. How do you keep leaders at the table is also a really important challenge to address. And as Jan mentioned earlier, enormous goodwill was created by a couple of our resettlement agencies when they became more familiar with resettlement, the resettlement impact in our community. They understood from our partners' conversations that all the service organizations truly wanted to try to increase capacity for services so that any refugee that was in need of service could receive it. The resettlement agencies then, in turn, decreased their annual numbers at one point, recognizing that if they could decrease slightly and the community could increase its services, then we could achieve successful resettlement potentially more quickly. So that gesture by the two resettlement agencies, it just brought enormous goodwill, and that goodwill really keeps people at the table. Everyone realizes it's just not a one-way street, that we're working together collaboratively with joint goals. And then lastly, when elected officials aren't willing to step up, who will? I know Boise is somewhat unique, that there are other communities where elected officials may not be aware of resettlement, just as we really weren't aware until we had the great outreach by the Idaho Office for Refugees. But I do believe, based on our community experience, that there are other organizations in your community that are well respected, that will either have dynamic CEOs or executive directors. And so I would encourage you, if you are in a community where the electeds may have indicated a more negative perspective, I would recommend that you reach out to community partners. And a lot of public will and political will can be cultivated within the community. So again, if you have a well-respected YMCA or a well-respected United Way, or maybe it's a well-respected faith organization, maybe it's even a corporation, look at their leadership and then look at their board of directors. And my belief is that you'll find very strong community voices that are affiliated with some of those successful companies or organizations, and start the dialogue there if you can't get the dialogue going with your electeds. It's interesting how quickly electeds will open a door for potentially a CEO, and then if they have this as one of their key issues, you often get buy-in in that way. I also touch on the evolving opportunities for leadership. And this is, again, for any of you that are listening that may be with a municipal entity, whether it's a city or a county. What we have discovered is that the mayor has had increasing leadership opportunities simply by his engagement in this community plan. An example is his weekly mayor's business retention visits. He now focuses on incorporating immigrant and refugee-owned businesses in those visits. He also, when he's attending community partners events, he will may not know who the clients are, but he will likely know board members or executive leadership. And that again speaks back to cultivating leadership within your own community that can then reach out to your mayor if your mayor isn't already at the table. Their opportunity is the celebrating success. Annually, the mayor gives a State of the City address, which is very common in municipalities across the country. And the mayor was able to use as one of his cornerstones in his speech last summer, refugee settlement. And it was an audience of over 900 business leaders in the community. So it was fantastic because he recognized the success of being part of this community effort, and then he was able to share that to a broad audience to encourage employment and to encourage engagement in refugee resettlement. So with that, I wanted to just end with a couple pictures of Boiseans at work and play. The youth photo is taken from our Parks and Rec program that we call a mobile rec van. That was created in response to the transportation challenges of getting low-income children to recreational programs. So our Parks and Rec department put together a van, filled it up with all kinds of recreation opportunities, and now goes out to apartment complexes that have high population of refugee residents. So it's a terrific example of how our strategic planning actually led to benefits for other community members. And then the top left corner, these are two refugees that are receiving job training through a nonprofit that is Create Common Good in Boise. With that, I will look forward to any questions that may follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa and Jan, for such a wealth of information about your work in Boise and how the community has been able to come together and really think comprehensively about refugee resettlement. We want to pause right now for all of you on the webinar to give you a little bit of time to reflect on what you've heard so far and to think about applications for your own work. And so now I'd like to really encourage you to send in through the Q&A feature any questions that you have for our speakers so far, anything that you find yourself running with. And we'll spend a little bit of time answering some of those, and then we'll move on to some additional speakers from Boise. So again, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll get to those. I want to start with a question that we've received on resources. As we all know, while the efforts are incredibly valuable, they're also resource intensive sometimes. Financially, they can be resource intensive, as well as time, probably our most precious resource. Jan and Teresa, do you want to talk a little bit about resources? In particular, there's a question about the costs for the professional facilitation and how resources were brought to bear to handle those costs. But I'd also like to hear a little bit about time allocation as well.
First. I'll just jump in like I always do.
Go right ahead.
It's a wonderful question, and especially when you're dealing with nonprofits and municipal government. Resources are always tight, and especially following the downturn of the economy. But as I mentioned when we started out on this effort, we tied the city's engagement back to the strategic planning initiative that was cultivated through extensive outreach. And the City of Boise does have a budget for strategic implementation. And so Idaho Office for Refugees and the City of Boise share the cost of facilitation, and the cost that comes from the city comes out of our strategic initiative budget. Because again, I can point very clearly to the council and the mayor and to any citizens how this directly serves our strategic initiatives and our citizen focus areas.
I'll just add that I think the financial cost, the monetary cost of facilitation and facilitation, the ongoing plan implementation that we are currently paying for by having a person on contract who you will hear from very shortly do that work of continuing to drive the plan forward. It's been minimal, really, in relation to the human resources cost, the time and the energy that people have put into the process, which is that's a cost we can't be close to calculating, because there have been so many human hours that have been involved in meetings and planning and continuing to meet and actually doing the work of implementation, which often is part of the jobs that people are doing anyway, but not in every case. But strict in terms of dollars and cents, it's been a cost-sharing partnership between the city and the Idaho Office for Refugees, and we are continuing that relationship to continue to implement the plan. I don't really think it would be productive to try to continue implementation of the plan without that kind of a point person whose job is to do it.
Yeah, I would just like to add, when you look beyond the facilitation expense and you look at the resource question, many of our partner organizations at the table all have very limited resources. And what has been required for the plan to have some success at the implementation level is looking at alternative funding streams. So, for example, we had one of our healthcare partners look for opportunities to increase translator and interpreter resources for care. They learned of a grant through their own organization's contacts within their own industry. So it does require some clever brainstorming. It requires looking at maybe some resources and repurposing them within either your city government or with your own organization. But this has all been done without a new funding source. So it didn't create the community plan fund. And I think that is what is thrilling about a well-mapped plan, is that we're really trying to increase capacity by looking at existing resources, potentially repurposing them, looking at new partnerships, and then looking at different grants or alternative funding streams that may be unique to each organization's partnership.
Right. I'm getting a lot of interesting questions through chat. So it's going to be hard to limit these, because I know we have to move on. So I'm going to ask you a couple more key questions. And this next one I think is really for Jan, and I think it's really an excellent question. It's a question of luring the numbers of new arrivals as a tool for improved integration. Thinking about its use as a temporary device, and balancing that with the fact that it could possibly be used to actually permanently curb resettlement programs in certain places. And we've certainly seen that there have been some bung up of that in different parts around the country. So can you talk a little bit about that, Jan, in terms of, that fine line that you walk in terms of, being flexible to number of arrivals, but also, not wanting to get to a place where you're jeopardizing the program?
I'll give that a shot. It is a fine line. What happened in Boise was really a relation that first of all, the numbers had grown so dramatically in prior years. We had seen in Boise go from 300 a year to 800, 900 a year, and the result of that, in conjunction with the other factors that created this crisis that occurred, it became pretty clear that those numbers at existing economic reality were really not sustainable any longer. Not that they wouldn't be in the future, but I think that one of the real goals of establishing some kind of a capacity measurement for community is that you do get locked in to a particular number, and it's very difficult to change that number. But I think if you're not really looking at the situation as this is our capacity, we can't exceed, and we're going to limit it, and therefore that's going to be our new normal from here on. Never really approach it that way. I think it was one of the concerns that the resettlement agencies active was that refugees were not succeeding in the limited time they had with cash assistance. And in our state, we have a little different program for cash assistance than most other states, which I don't need to go into. But our TANF program is really not a viable resource for people. So after 8 months, we had the safety net essentially disintegrated at that 8-month point, and I think settlement agencies were cognizant of that and were looking at the best to serve refugees. It was really not so much, it was entirely to the economic environment as it was to what was actually affecting refugees. So I'm not sure that's an answer to the question. I don't know that there is one that I really have solidly in my mind, but I can understand where that question comes from in terms of sort of the slippery slope of voluntarily reducing numbers when in fact we know that there's a tremendous need for protection through resettlement that's ongoing.
Great. Last question before we move on to our next speakers. What if there's been a strategic plan in place when this perfect storm was, what if you hadn't moved forward with a strategic plan when this perfect storm was coming together? Is a plan really essential in an environment like you were going through or have been through?
Well, I'd be happy to give the city's perspective. The plan was created as we were going through the storm. So the storm created the urgency, and then the plan was built on top of these relationships that the Idaho Office for Refugees and Resettlement Agencies had been laying years prior. And for the city of Boise, it just wasn't an option. We did not want to resettle refugees into homelessness. It was, and that's what was threatening us with the very few jobs available and the limited resources. We were starting to hear from our shelters and from other community partners that refugees were on the brink of homelessness. And although the city of Boise is not, there was no official declaration that we would become a resettlement community, it grew organically in our community for all the reasons we love Boise. And that is because we have a welcoming community where we care of people within the community. We had ready employment. We had good housing options. It's a king place. And for Boise to be identified by resettlement agencies years ago as a soft landing is an enormous compliment to us. And as the mayor, he took his responsibility very seriously, that if you want to make a community the most livable community in the country, you can't have one part of your a section of your residents on the brink of homelessness, or those that have that entrepreneurial spirit and want to work, and the only reason they can't work is there aren't jobs available. So for us, we needed the plan. We needed more tools in our toolkit than what the city had, because we just had services, but we don't provide a lot of what was needed. And it was very quick, as Jen pointed out, that we realized the benefits of having a plan, because we were starting to build capacity in many areas of the community that are benefiting the broader community. So it just wasn't an option for us.
Thank you both so much. We're going to move on now.
May I just add a couple of comments to that, Susan?
Okay,
I'll be very brief. But I would say, number one, the decision to go forward with a strategic plan was a community decision. I mean, in the sense that it wasn't the city's decision, it wasn't the Idaho Office for Refugees' decision. It was really demanded by the holders that were brought to the table, 25 or 30 different organizations represented, who said we have to do something, and we need to figure out what the needs are. We need to figure out how we can approach it. And so whether or not there was actually a plan developed, I mean, that's the road we went down. Whether or not there was actually a plan developed, I think the more important part of the process is that relationships were built, stakeholders were brought to the table, more collaborations were happening in new places where they hadn't happened before, and and this whole idea of an organic movement really beginning in the community where things started popping and it was hard to keep up with them. So whether or not the place necessary for that to happen, I think that's the kind of thing that has to happen. And really, it's all about building those relationships throughout the community.
Great. Thanks so much, Jan. And so we all know refugees are a big part of any process like this. And so, figuring out how to best work with and engage refugee leadership is critically important. For that, I'd like to turn over to Katuta Asimba, who will share more with you about refugee leadership engagement in the Boise Plan. Katuta? We need to get Asimba unmuted. Doesn't look like we have him unmuted yet. Sorry, everybody. Please hold tight. I think we may be having a little bit of a technical difficulty getting our next speaker on the line. While we try to do that, I will have, here we go. We'll have Asimba. It looks like he's on. Asimba, are you ready?
Oh, yeah, I'm very ready.
Great. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you much. I'm so honored to be part of this presentation. And we'll be talking about these three main points. So the refugee leadership engagement. So the importance of refugees involvement, the benefits to refugees and their entire community. And I will be also talking about getting refugees engaged in the planning process and implementation. The overall situation here, it's very important to make sure that refugees are involved in the development of the strategic plan. And refugee, as an active member of the community, I felt it was very important for me to be involved in this, since I'm more aware about the issues that impact the refugees, and I know all about their success and challenges. So, very convinced that the refugees' voice should be part of this discussion. Not include refugees in this discussion. That, to me, I felt that could be very unfair and that could be very unwise and very unproductive. So the second reason why I was so much involved in this planning was about suffer discrimination from their countries of origin and camp or somewhere in their resettled country. So this moment and turned it into an opportunity to voice these issues. So this should be we should consider that being part of conversation is how being part of the solution. So say if refugees are not being part of this conversation, I wouldn't see myself seeing those issues or those challenges of refugees being solved. So, and I also took this opportunity to be engaged because I work for EDA Community Action Partnership as the refugee liaison. I felt that in the community is to work with low-income members of our community, and so this was a very golden opportunity for me to be part of this solution. And the benefit to the benefit to refugees in the community. The plan is to improve the conditions of resettled refugees. So if community has a vision here and a compass to follow. So this is very important. Since this plan has been put in place, to me it's very important because the community has a vision. It has a place whereby it can go and refer itself to the land. I felt that refugees will be more productive and contributing. So by involving refugees, the whole community will become very healthy because we can use their experiences and their expertise to this plan. So how can we get refugees involved? There are efforts that need to take place before dreaming of any strategic plan. So they need to mobilize and identify refugees and those leaders in the community. We ask refugees about their major challenges and their issues. So we have also to identify those organizations which are working closely with refugees, include them to be part of the conversation. And we also have to remember that we have to empower refugees to have a voice, and have to make sure that that voice of refugees can be heard. We have to motivate and the right level of consciousness for refugees and ethnic organizations so that they feel they have value in the community and that their voices are well recognized as well. So when it comes to the table, we don't have to treat them as kids. We have to make sure that their voices have value and also partnership, and have to consider that the experiences can add more, can get a very good essence to use in the plan. To emphasize on this, emphasizing success in implementation of this organization. Let me up. We have to make sure that I think this plan is not just going to be under the table, or the plan is not going to be used. So refugees have to be convinced that by coming to the table, part of their challenges will be addressed in that strategic plan. And the committee should understand that having this plan is not the end of the conversation. This should be the beginning of the solution. So, I'm turning my presentation to Sherry Dyer.
Well, thank you very much, Asemba. I really appreciated what Asemba ended his comments on, and I totally agree with him. Having the plan is not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning of the solution. And I think we want to start off with talking about this plan with that, kind of keeping in mind it's an ongoing process. It's been going on for some time at a variety of different levels. I'm just going to give you the details, how we got started, what place, how we are going to continue to keep this alive. Jim talked about the initial steps of involving more people to work as partners and pushing the ownership out into the resettlement system, encouraging a high level of collaboration. Teresa talked about the significant work that has been going on, has been going on, engaging community leaders as partners. So what are the specifics of this process that we've been talking about throughout this entire presentation? What were the initial steps? What was the long-term approach? How did we really get started? I would like to take us back to 2002 and talk about the foundation. This was the first effort I got involved in the resettlement process as hired facilitator to work with other resettlement agency directors and the Idaho Office for Refugee Leadership, look for ways for those people to begin to work more effectively together, to build areas of agreement, identify areas of disagreement, evaluate what the strengths and weaknesses were in the methodologies and the communications and the processes. And over time, this effort resulted in a consensus-building process that from which we developed a comprehensive network charter that is clarification of roles and responsibilities, specific agreement on decision-making, whose authority it was to make what decisions, how they were going to work together. We set a set of ground rules that basically dealt with even treatment of one another and resolving conflicts, the methods for identifying and resolving those conflicts. So this network charter that's been in place, like I said, since about 2002. It's been updated a time or two since that point as new people like resettlement directors, et cetera, have been added to the system. We go back and we revisit so that we keep that network charter alive and well at that point. And that's a really good solid building block for doing a community plan. So it was time in 2009 then to broaden the circle and bring service providers together, and the resettlement community had a strong network as a springboard for that effort. So to work. There was a fair amount of visioning of the future of work being done at this stage. Our ultimate objective was a citywide and service-wide set of goals and objectives with responsible parties willing to be and stay engaged for the long term. And those were parts and pieces of the communications at the very beginning. It was like if you want to be involved in the long term, this probably isn't a good place for you to be. But it was wonderful to see how many people in our community said, yes, we want to be a part of this. We want to be a part of this effort, because they knew that there was also opportunity to be more effective and more efficient in the consolidating of their efforts. Needed to belong to ownership, needed to belong to everyone involved, and it was going to require some specific methods and means for keeping people informed and engaged and accountable. So we wanted people who were and would remain involved, who could lead, who could communicate, who were committed for the long term, to the big goal of developing a community-wide plan. Needs and opportunities would be identified and defined and categorized in 6 areas. Jan already mentioned those 6 areas. Education at all levels, and so in education probably had both K through 12 section, we had an adult education section, and we had an early childhood section, knowing that those were going to be 3 different kinds of approaches to education planning. And then had the employment section, health, housing, transportation, and then this other area we called social integration, which involved really the longer-term focus. In some respects, post-agent resettlement process, what about then going out and looking into the future? We definitely wanted something that kept everybody fully informed. We wanted to make sure that we had this understanding and acceptance and a continuous process. Again, it was not to be just a plan that gets put on a shelf. I've been in the business world as a business leader for many years, and my work as a strategic planner, and too often plans got put on a shelf. And I will say in congratulations to the system, the people involved, that has not been the case. Again, with the end in mind, you've probably heard that statement before. Obviously, we just said, how do we get started? Engaging a facilitator, establishing a planning team. We had to get structure in place first. So the first thing we did was start looking at who could lead, who would be the people we would call the collaborators, the developers of the plan, and also who would be the doers after the fact. So a plan involving key people of Idaho Office for Refugee and the city, that obviously involved Jan and Teresa at that point, and also the facilitator being me. A committee then was also established involving leaders of various service providers of the community. So people involved in resettlement from the hospitals, the state departments, like the Department of Labor, Health and Welfare, city program directors, community partners such as the YMCA, the United Way, direct service providers like the hospitals, transportation systems, the schools, the people from the Boise school system. So all in all, when the steering committee was initially formed, we identified about 40 different partners that we invited to provide representatives then to work with us on the planning process itself. We identified specialists who could work and lead on the 6 key service areas that had been identified. They became the implementation team. So we have a planning team, we have a steering committee made up of leaders across the community, and then we have the in the trenches people that became part of the implementation team, chairs and co-chairs of each of the 6 focus areas. You can see this took a lot of effort to just through the whole process from the beginning. How are we going to do this before we put our toe in the water of actually doing it? We developed systems to keep people in the loop. Consistent communications was essential. Thank God for email. That was the best way the most effective way we had of keeping everybody engaged. Regular meetings also, face-to-face meetings, ongoing reporting, where are we, what's next step, post material on the IOR website. And I may say this again later, but I'll repeat what has already been said. The good news for the people that are listening to this, have access to all the work that we've done through the IOR website. We post our plans, we post our progress reports, we post information on our steering committee and some of the organizations that are represented there. So it's something that, in essence, you can really get hold of and begin to build off of that kind of, I don't know what best practice, that would be maybe a little bit arrogant, but certainly building off of something that has already been done and that has seen some success. Identified and brought together more than 150 specialists then who would participate in these work groups over the next several months of the work. We had about 25 people in each group, give or take. And I'm going to go back in my mind about any refugees we had involved, but we did have refugees involved in every one of these 6 areas of the planning team. It was difficult for them to participate, I will say, simply because of their jobs, but they were definitely involved in a real asset to the process. The result then was the 30-page plan document with goals for each of those sections, specific objectives. So what are things we need to do in order to achieve those goals? The next action steps, much more specific, details about the steps we were going to take. We had, to the greatest extent possible, we had some perspective on time frames, but we were cautious not to overkill on the time frame part of it, simply because we knew that people were going to be having to do the best they could of adding responsibilities to what they already were doing that was keeping them very busy. So, but we've had a process that's been allowing people to stay in tune and on top of this. So having specific data and action steps has not been a drawback, in my opinion, as a planner. So by July 2010, we had this 30-page document in place that identified responsible parties and partners. Again, reinforcing that information is on the website. Again, being a person who's been involved in strategic planning in corporations over the years, I have often been disappointed to do a lot of work in strategic planning and finding people just putting those plans in the drawer. And this has been the thrill to see that it has survived and continuous. There's been this ongoing coordination process. It just has to be there. There has to be this continuous keeping this information in front of people. The same people that were identified 4 years ago to chair and co-chair the various sections of the plan remain involved today, which I believe is just outstanding. We meet regularly with many of they meet regularly, with many of the same committee members that were a part of the process early on. And those committee members really wanted to be engaged and really wanted to be involved in the long run. So they do stay engaged, and these co-chairs have responsibility for making that happen. There's been a tremendous long-term commitment on the part of the people involved in this whole original planning process. Excuse me. Another keeping it alive is to review the plan periodically. So last year, in the middle of the summer, we held a retreat. 2 years after the plan was completed, we held a retreat of the implementation team and updated and streamlined the plan. So we now have a new plan with some new ideas and some new directions, but also some of the old goals and objectives as well. Our chair quarterly, this is another way we keep it alive and continuous. We have quarterly meetings of the implementation team to provide updates and report on new and changing trends and discuss areas of success, areas where we need help from other sources. And then, again, just show you the commitment of these implementation team. We have quarterly written progress reports that are submitted and posted on our IOR website as well. So this is a very standard, very typical kind of strategic planning process. What's wonderful about it is it's one that's really working, that people are really committed to. So what? Expanding the circle, pushing out into the community. A critical part of the effort is ensuring that in the community we have more people that get engaged. We communicate with a broad audience. The idea is to release reins and, again, let the people be creative that they can be. Continually responsive to the community priorities, so we continually ask the questions, what's going on in the community, what we need to be responding to, and always always celebrate success. Our plan is highlighted at the annual conference on refugees, and many of the successes that have come from this plan are highlighted as to the presentation as well. Pardon me. So we believe what gets planned gets done, and we've seen it. We've seen it happen. We've seen it in operation. We know our purpose, our processes, and we have them in paper, keep us accountable, and we engage people to make sure it continues to happen. The results are outstanding.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry and Simba. And now we're going to take a moment for your questions again. So please send those in through the Q&A feature on your computer, and we will be happy to take some of your questions. So let's start perhaps by talking a little bit about engaging refugees, and maybe Asimba, you can help us out with this a little bit. We have a question from someone who asks about suggestions for refugee groups who feel that city and mainstream stakeholders may not want to listen to them. How can we do more to make refugees feel welcome in these kinds of processes? How can they be effective advocates for themselves, becoming part of these kinds of conversations? Can you share with us a little bit, Asimba, on your thoughts about that?
Oh, thanks so much. First of all, creating this plan shouldn't just come from nowhere. And work has to take place before even you start to have a plan. And the members of the community, the refugee settlements, and all people who are involved in bringing solutions to work for refugees, they have to establish a very good background, a very good rapport with those community organizations. And I will give you a pragmatic example. I have Jen, who is the chair of Office of Refugees, who could come on the ground and work with those community organizations to them and listen to them and them about their challenges, and they could share ahead of time before even they were welcome before even they could be welcome to come and join the plan process. Second element I can add is about building trust and creating that cultural environment so that when refugees come on the table, are just coming there to listen. You have to make sure that they are primary subject of that plan and their voices should be made. So you have to work on numbers of issues can be there, and the motivation also can be there.
Okay. And that really strikes me as so important, Simba, because we know sometimes we just get in a rush to start having these big conversations, and we don't always take the time to slow down and reach out one on one to have very early introductory conversations with people like refugees who may not have been involved in a strategic planning process ever before in our lives. And so slow down and taking time to build the relationships and help people understand what their role could be in a community process like this is really important. I have another question.
Let's do one more thing. Sure. About refugees and how they feel. Most of refugees, when they came from when we come from our home countries, we trust the promises. There have been so many false promises, and they have a lot of expectations. So if you want to have a plan, you have to make sure that you can measure this plan is going to work. They have to be more aware about that. It's not just something which just coming over and then talk about it and put it at the table or on the web page and after. So refugees have to, that's kind of trust again. You have to work with the refugees to make sure that you tell them this is a plan which is going to be effective and is going to benefit them. Thank you.
Great. Here's a question about the role of the local resettlement organizations, and I'm not sure which of our panelists would like to take this on, maybe Sherry or Jan. But can you talk a little bit about the role of the local refugee resettlement organizations and how they work together on this process, and to what extent they were coordinating their messages and working together on advocacy through this process?
A minute, Jan, or do you want to take it?
We'll take just a minute, and then I'll let you
Sure.
take it from there. But Sherry has been involved in each of the subcommittees' work. She's either been attending meetings, facilitating the meetings that the subcommittees at the different, education, employment, healthcare, and so on have been meeting. So Sherry's been very closely involved with all of that work. And to the question directly, refugee resettlement agencies have all been a part of the process. We have an implementation team which consists of resettlement agencies and committee chairs and co-chairs. My office is represented, the city is represented. And so every stage along the way, the resettlement agencies have been involved in the planning, and they are key parts of the implementation plan as well. So Sherry, maybe you can add to that.
Well, I think you said it. The great part about it is that these are actually chairing some of the working committees. There's certainly wonderful resources for giving specific information to the rest of the people in the groups. The planning team, the implementation team, they can give them very detailed information about the whys and the wherefores that we have to give consideration to some of these goals and actions. But they are at the table all the time. And they chair committees as well as participate in and give input to all the other committees. And like I say, they're at the table all the time.
Susan, this is Teresa. I would like to add, in order for the mayor to be invested in inviting the community to the table and establishing the steering committee and investing a lot of his political will into this process, it was critical to have the resettlement agencies as partners, because we recognized the solution had to come from the entire community and not just the community responding to agencies resettling refugees. So absolutely critical in order for us to become involved as city leadership, but also to invite the really critical partners we needed for the steering committee.
Great. Time for one last question, and that is about outcomes. Can you talk a little bit about any outcomes that you've seen so far from your team effort?
Let me start out, and I'll ask the others to join in. But I think that one of the things that we have been trying to do, and have, I think, been fairly successful in doing, is recording outcomes on a periodic basis. We've talked about the progress reports. The progress reports that are submitted to the entire group quarterly are directly linked to the objectives and the goals of the plan. So we can record activities, we can record accomplishments, we can record progress toward achieving a particular objective on the plan very easily, and we've done that, and we will continue to do that. I could speak to some specific outcomes, and maybe that would be interesting to the group, but before I do that, I would like to just pass it on to Sherry and Teresa, and perhaps Asimba, if he has something to offer about outcomes.
I can say from the city's perspective, even just looking at how we've modified city services, some of the successful outcomes include our housing and community development hosting landlord trainings, so landlords will be more inclined to open opportunities for refugee residents. We have an increase in programming available through Parks and Rec, partnering with our school district and 3 community centers that we've built with 3 schools, the elementary schools, and we've increased our partnership with the school district on tutoring and providing support for families of our Title I schools, which are largely population-based of refugee families. And success can be measured in what new partner has come to the table. And we have an example where one hospital was very dynamic, very engaged, has a women's refugee care clinic, but the other hospital wasn't really at the table nor looking at ways that they could be part of the solution. Now have a seat on the steering committee and accepted that invitation from the mayor enthusiastically. So they're now looking through their children's hospital ways that they can become part of a solution for health needs of refugee children.
An outcome that you can point directly to as well is in the school system. It was initially very difficult to get some of the refugee parents involved with the educational part. They didn't know how to be involved, and so the school system established what's called PEL, Boise Parents of English Learners, and it's a group of parents that are advising together with the school system and the coordinators in the school system, advising them of the needs of the children and their education, and also learning and participating now more and more in the parent-teacher meetings where they're interacting with the teachers and learning more about how they can assist their children, and the teachers are learning more about what assistance those children need. So just the establishment of this was a direct outcome from the plan itself.
And I can also add that there is a lot of awareness in our communities about the refugees issues. So almost many agencies now they are aware about the refugees issues. For instance, in Boise State University, they are much engaged now with refugee communities and encouraging them go to the university and finish tertiary education. So a lot of awareness is taking place, and that's really what we need to see.
Add one more thing. Our landlords, who are the people that are providing housing for refugees, are learning a great deal more because of some of the work being done by the Housing Committee. They're having meetings with landlords and teaching them about the needs and the circumstances for refugees, so the landlords are becoming more sensitive to and more empathetic toward what the needs are in terms of housing, in terms of teaching refugees about appropriate use of the housing, making more houses and living quarters available to the refugees. Kids are learning to serve better.
Well, thank you all very much. It's exciting to think about what can be possible by coming together as a community like this. We're starting to run a little short on time, so I want to turn it quickly over to Hannah Carswell here at Welcoming America to wrap up with some next steps. Hannah?
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We would like to announce our upcoming Boise Model Learning Circle, which will be a more in-depth exploration of the topics that we covered in today's webinar. This will be an opportunity to connect with a peer network on quarterly conference calls about building a comprehensive city plan for welcoming refugees. If you do this learning circle, you will have the opportunity to learn more about comprehensive planning as well as to share the successes and challenges of your work with a peer network. So to apply for this opportunity, send me an email at hannah@welcomingamerica.org by June 1st with 3 things: the geographic reach of your work, what I'd like to join, and the comprehensive planning topic that you are most interested in discussing. I would also like to invite you to join us for our next webinar entitled Using Blog to Build Understanding and Welcoming for Refugees on June 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern. In this hour, we will be covering tools and practices that can help you start conversations that build understanding and welcoming for refugees in your community. To register, you can visit the link on this slide or visit our website at welcomingamerica.org/resources/refugees. So, I encourage you to apply to our learning circle. We also ask you to send in examples of promising practices. If you heard something today that made you think about a great project that's going on in your community, we want to hear about it. You can send us an email with that information or contact me to set up a phone call to discuss it. We want to put a spotlight on organizations that are engaging the receiving community in their work in an innovative way. Also, you share the recording of this webinar widely. We will send out an email reminder when the recording slides and other resources are available on our website. I would also like to encourage you to take the time to complete our survey once you exit the webinar. We really want to create webinars that are helpful for you, so your feedback is extremely important to us. 2 respondents will be randomly selected to receive a copy of our Building a Nation of Neighbors DVD and a copy of Warren St. John's book, Outcasts United. Now I would like to turn the floor back over to my colleague Susan Down-Carcos.
So everyone, just a few final words as we wrap up. I would like to thank all of our speakers today from Boise who did such a tremendous job in sharing their experiences with us and helping us think about what might be possible in our own communities. So thank you to Jan and to Sherry and to Teresa and to Asimba. We're deeply appreciative of your work and of your time. I also would like to thank Hannah for being mastermind behind the webinar and dealing with all the logistics in particular today. She did a great job in managing all of that as usual. I'd like to thank the Office of Refugee Resettlement for their financial support, which makes all of this work possible. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us on the call. We hope that this webinar has been helpful. And like Hannah said, I'd really like to encourage you to give us some feedback afterwards and fill out the online survey that pops up when you log out of WebEx. So this marks the end of our webinar today. Again, we really want to thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.